guys, Bite Size Bible in a Year chronological edition for April 15th. We read 1 Samuel 20 and 21 and Psalm 34. Aren't you loving reading the Psalms in context? I love knowing what's going on with David as he's penning the Psalm. It just makes it come alive, I think, because I know what's going on with him, so I know why he's writing. I just love that. Stick with me till the end because I'm going to give you a couple of ways to apply what you're reading, because remember, we don't want the Bible to be an item on a checklist of things that good little Christian people do. We want to read the Bible, giving God an opportunity to speak to us and for us to receive and speak to Him, and just giving Him that time to change us. So I'm going to try to help you do that at the end. Much shorter video today than yesterday. All right. 1 Samuel 20, we're seeing a really sad situation with Jonathan and David and King Saul. Jonathan's eyes are open to who his dad really is, that he's this super toxic person, and that causes David and Jonathan to have to part ways. And you see it says that Jonathan is crushed, and it just makes me so sad for him and for David, because it's just this awakening that his dad is toxic and horrible. And it just made me think about something that we don't really talk about much in the church, or maybe your church does, I don't know, and if they do, yay. But we don't really talk about toxic people. We talk a lot about loving people, but we don't really talk about, well, what happens if that person is really toxic? And we see here in Saul an example of somebody who is toxic. He is asking Jonathan to choose between him and David. He says, bring David to me so I can kill him. He's extremely self-focused and selfish, all about himself and his own advancement in the world. He is, well, let me make sure I don't miss any. He is he takes, and never gives. And he's slanderous and murderous. Now, we probably don't know anybody who is physically murderous, but we might be involved with somebody who is verbally murderous. We walk away from these instances with them, these circumstances, time spent with them, and we may feel horrible about ourselves. We may feel beat up. We may feel guilty or ashamed, or like we're a really horrible person. If that's the case, you might be involved in a toxic relationship, and it's time to set up some boundaries, because we really have to, number one, we have to train people how to treat us, but number two, we are called to love people. We're not called, that does not equal, let them all the way in, let them stomp all over your emotions and you. That's not love. Sometimes love says, you can come this far, I'm going to love you, but I'm not going to let you treat me that way. Or it may just be an internal boundary where that person says something and you're like, I'm not accepting that as truth. Not going to do it. That's not the truth. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end, but just something to start thinking about. That loving people does not equal letting them tromp all over us. All right, and then we see David running from Saul. He's about 20, they think he's about 20 years old at this point, and he spends about 10 years in exile out in the wilderness running from Saul. And we'll talk more about this specific instance tomorrow, because it's really a precursor to what we read today in our reading in the April 16th reading. And then, but we do see at the end where he starts to act insane so that this other king that he's afraid of doesn't kill him. And so we do see this human side of David where he reacts out of fear. But he's in this horrible situation. This bad thing has happened. This awful thing has happened to David, yet he loves God. So that might be you. You might be in a circumstance today where you're thinking, what did I do to deserve this? Maybe you didn't do anything, and it's just that sometimes bad things happen to godly people. But this is what we can do when we're in those situations, exactly what David does in Psalm 34, where he starts to rehearse the truth about God. You see in verse 2, he says, let all who are helpless take heart. So maybe he's feeling helpless, but he takes heart by rehearsing all the truth he knows about God. He says that he's only going to boast about the Lord. I will boast only in the Lord. I will praise the Lord at all times, not just in the good times. And then he starts saying things like he hears, he frees from fear, he gives joy, he removes shame, he listens. He doesn't just hear, he listens, like he's leaning in, listening for us. He delivers, he defends, he's good. He provides everything that we need. He watches over us. He rescues, and he's close to the brokenhearted. And maybe that's what you need to hear today. Maybe you need to read over Psalm 34 and accept that as truth for you in whatever circumstance you're in. So that's actually the first of the two things that I'm going to ask you to do to really integrate what you read. Pick one of these two things, do them both. I don't care. do whatever you feel like you need to do. First one is pray through Psalm 34 out loud, receiving everything that's in there as truth for yourself about God and you. And then pick a part that you want to remember and memorize. Memorize that part, because when we're going through a hard time, it's easier to retrieve the truth if it's up here, if we've already memorized it. So that's the first one. The second one, maybe, is there a friend that you think might be toxic? If so, bring that person before God and go, God, is this person toxic? Talk to me about this friendship. How do I need to proceed from here? And then do what he says. And so, like for me, I'm about to read a book called Boundaries. I've heard it's really good, so I'm going to read that. You might think about something like that. Or maybe you talk to a counselor about it. Or my friend Mary DeMuth wrote a book called 7 Deadly Friendships. You might want to read about that. It's about toxic relationships. I don't know. Bring it to God and see what he says. So do one of those two things or both to integrate what it is that you read yesterday. All right, so if you have the Bible, you're free to go. I will talk to you tomorrow. Farewell. If you don't, I'm gonna give you the list of what we're reading tomorrow. It's kind of all over the place. Okay, so the first thing we're reading is 1 Samuel 22, 1 and 2, then Psalm 57, Psalm 142, 1 Chronicles 12, 8 through 18, back to 1 Samuel 22, 3 through 23, Psalm 52, and then the last thing is back to 1 Samuel 23, 1 through 12. And we will talk about that tomorrow. Farewell.